Welcome back. Tonight, we drift through the sleepy streets of lost cities of ancient Egypt. So wherever you are, however your day has been, you have nothing to do now but rest. There are no twists tonight, nothing to follow, nothing you need to remember in the morning. A city of warm stone and drifting sand, growing still beneath a cooling dusk, will drift slowly, in no hurry to be anywhere at all. If these journeys help you rest, you're welcome to follow along, but only if you'd like to. And if you're listening now, leave the name of your city and the time where you are. Wherever you're listening from, you're in good company tonight. So let yourself settle. Let your shoulders soften and let your eyes close whenever they're ready. Breathe in slowly. And let it go. There's no need to stay awake for any of this. Just let the streets of lost cities of ancient Egypt come to you. Far to the south, the Nile flows fast and cold. Here, the water hits a massive wall of jagged pink granite. This is the first cataract. Long ago, people built the city of Elephantine, right on these smooth rocks. The island sits like a stone ship in the middle of the rushing river. It was a perfect, natural bottleneck. Anyone traveling north from Nubia had to stop here. The river was simply too wild to pass without help. Because of this, the city grew rich. Guards stood on the high granite boulders. They watched every wooden boat that approached. Merchants had to pay a tax to move their goods past the island. You can still see the deep marks in the stone where ancient docks once stood. The city did not grow by accident. It thrived because the river gave it no other choice. The water shaped the stone, and the stone shaped the city. Further north, the desert stretches out in a wide, flat plain. This quiet stretch of sand is called Abydos. At first it was just a simple, dusty town. But over time, a powerful belief took hold. Early people became convinced that the god Osiris was buried right here in the sand. That single idea changed everything. The quiet town slowly transformed into a sprawling, sacred city of the dead. Kings and commoners alike wanted to rest near the god. They built thousands of mud-brick tombs across the open desert. Small stone chapels rose up to catch the morning light. The air here always smells faintly of dry dust and old stone. You can imagine the endless processions walking out into the heat. They carried offerings to a god they believed slept just beneath their feet. The city grew massive, driven entirely by the deep human wish to be close to the divine. Some cities were built to lock the land together. The Middle Kingdom capital of Ichtawi was one of these places. It sat right at the lush, green edge, where the narrow river valley opens into the wide delta. This spot was a perfect natural bottleneck. The kings founded the city here specifically to control travel between the north and the south. From their mud-brick palaces, they could watch every ship that passed. But rivers are restless things. Over thousands of years, the water shifted its course. Deep layers of dark river mud washed over the abandoned streets. The mud buried the palaces and the walls. For millennia, the exact location of this great capital was completely lost. The earth simply swallowed it whole. Farmers grew green crops right over the hidden throne rooms. The city slept in total darkness, wrapped in the damp soil, waiting for someone to finally notice it again. The lost capital stayed hidden under the fields for a very long time. No one walking on the soft dirt knew what lay below. But the earth always keeps a memory of what it used to hold. Recently, scientists looked down at this green valley from space. Satellite imagery revealed a faint, ghostly depression in the ground. It was the exact shape of a dried-up river channel. This old waterway once flowed right past the ancient walls. The satellite saw what human eyes could not see from the ground. The slight dip in the soil gave the secret away. The river had moved, but it left a scar in the earth. That scar finally pinpointed where the great city once stood. It is strange to think about. A city built to control the land was ultimately found by looking at the sky. The mud still holds the stones, quiet and safe. Out in the western desert, the sun beats down on empty sand, but in a place called the Fayoum, the landscape suddenly turns green. This lush oasis was not entirely an accident of nature. Long ago, kings looked at a natural dip in the desert floor. They decided to engineer it into a massive, artificial reservoir. They moved earth and channeled water until a vast calm lake filled the dry basin. Because of this massive project, a new settlement grew on the shore. It became known as Crocodilopolis. The water brought life to the dead sand. Palm trees sprouted along the muddy banks. The air grew cool and sweet. People built sprawling homes of mudbrick and stone near the water. The city thrived because human hands forced the desert to bloom. You can almost hear the wind rustling through the green fronds. The deep lake still reflects the bright morning sky today. Back in the eastern delta, the river takes a sharp, sudden turn. This tight curve in the water created a naturally protected pocket of land. A group of foreign kings, known as the Hyksos, saw how safe this spot was. They built a massive stronghold here, called Avarice. The sharp bend made it an impregnable naval base. Enemy ships could not easily sail around the corner without being seen. The foreign kings built thick mud-brick walls that looked out over the water. Wooden ships with square sails docked safely below the high citadel. The city grew loud with the sounds of soldiers and merchants. The river acted like a natural moat, keeping the rulers safe inside. You can picture the guards standing on the walls, watching the sun glint off the water. The geography of the river gave them power. They held the delta tightly from this single, sharp bend. Eventually, the local Egyptian forces grew strong enough to fight back. They marched north, and finally expelled the foreign kings from the delta. But when they took the great stronghold, they did not tear it down. The victorious pharaoh Ahmose had a different plan. He wanted to make a very clear point. He ordered his workers to level the old mud-brick foundations. Then, he built a brand new palace directly over the ruins. The new columns were brightly painted in the clear sunlight. This was not just a building project. It was a symbol of absolute victory. Every time the pharaoh walked through his new halls, he was stepping on the memory of his enemies. The old city was buried under the weight of the new one. The river kept flowing around the sharp bend, just as it always had. But the flags flying above the water had finally changed. Sometimes a city is born just for a single party. Far to the south, the sprawling complex of Malkata rose from the dry earth. It was never meant to be a permanent home. Workers built the entire place out of simple mud brick. They constructed low palaces, wide courtyards, and long halls. The walls were freshly plastered and painted in bright, warm colors. All of this effort was for one specific event. Pharaoh Amenhotep III needed a place to host his massive Jubilee festival. For a few weeks, the desert was full of music, food and light. Thousands of people filled the temporary streets. But when the festival ended, the music stopped. The people packed up their things and walked away. The grand city was simply left behind in the quiet desert. The wind slowly wore down the painted mud brick. The temporary capital melted back into the sand it came from. A few generations later, a radical king named Akhenaten wanted a fresh start. He left the old capitals behind and sailed north. He was looking for a very specific sign in the landscape. He found it in a virgin desert valley. Here, he saw the sun rise perfectly between two prominent limestone cliffs. To him, this natural shape perfectly mimicked the sacred hieroglyph for the word horizon. Because of this trick of the light, he chose this exact spot. He ordered a massive new capital to be built in the empty sand. It was called Amarna. The city was born from a single moment of dawn sunlight. workers rushed to build temples and palaces under the bright sky. The king believed the sun itself had chosen the location. You can still stand in that valley today. If you wait for the morning, you will see the same golden light break through. The layout of this new desert capital was completely unique. The entire urban plan was dictated by one massive street. This was the Royal Road. It was an impossibly wide, perfectly straight thoroughfare that cut right through the Mudbrick neighborhoods. It was not built for merchants or normal traffic. It existed for the sole purpose of the king. Every single day he took a high-speed chariot ride down this exact path. The road had to be wide enough and straight enough for his horses to run fast. Statues and offering tables lined the dusty edges of the street. The whole city was forced to organize itself around this daily ritual. Houses and temples were pushed aside to keep the path clear. You can imagine the sound of wooden wheels spinning over the hard dirt. The city was essentially just a grand stage for one man to race his chariot. The grand desert capital did not last long. The king's radical ideas made him many enemies. After he died, later rulers decided to completely erase him from history. They did not just abandon his city. They systematically dismantled it. Laborers marched into the quiet valley and began taking the temples apart. They carefully removed the carved stone blocks from the walls. They loaded the heavy stones onto wooden carts. Then, they carried the pieces away to build other cities far up the river. The harsh midday sun beat down on the empty foundations. The beautiful palaces were stripped down to the bare dirt. The city vanished piece by piece, carried away on the backs of workers. It was a deliberate act of forgetting. The wide streets were left to the blowing sand. Soon there was nothing left but the two limestone cliffs, still catching the morning light in an empty valley. Building secret tombs requires absolute silence. The workers who carved the royal graves lived in a place called Deir el-Medina. It was a tightly packed village of small stone and mud brick houses. The location was terrible. It sat in a steep, rocky, completely dry desert ravine. There was no water source anywhere near the homes. The sun baked the narrow alleys all day long. But the site was chosen specifically for its harsh isolation. The rulers wanted to keep the tomb builders far away from everyone else. They needed to keep the locations of the royal graves completely safe. The workers and their families lived in this sweltering valley for generations. Every drop of water had to be carried in by hand. The village was a prison made of hot stone and royal secrets. You can feel how quiet the air is here. The high rock walls block out the rest of the world. The isolated village survived for centuries in the dry heat. But eventually the era of hidden graves came to an end. The rulers stopped carving new tombs into the deep rock of the valley. When the work stopped, the village lost its sole reason to exist. It was not destroyed by an army or a natural disaster. It was simply abandoned by obsolescence. The families packed up their tools and their belongings. They walked out of the rocky ravine and never came back. The small stone houses were left empty and silent. Wooden doors hung open in the dry wind. Dust blew through the narrow, winding alleys. The village slowly went to sleep under the twilight sky. No one needed to keep the secrets anymore. The harsh valley was finally left alone. Today, the empty walls still stand in the quiet shadows, waiting for workers who will never return. Power in the ancient world was always moving. Ramesses II decided to build a grand new capital in the eastern delta. He called it Pi-Ramesses. He did not build it here just for the green landscape. He wanted to shift political power far away from the wealthy priests in the south. By moving his court north, he took control back into his own hands. He was also returning to the flat green region where his own family originally came from. The new city was massive and bright. Towering stone columns rose up near the wide river. Colorful banners snapped in the clear daylight. The palace complex was a bold statement of royal independence. The king wanted everyone to know that the center of the world had moved. The air here smelled of fresh river water and blooming reeds. For a long time, this was the most important place on earth. The great northern capital seemed invincible, but it was ultimately defeated by something very small. The city was abandoned not because of a terrible war. It died because of mud. The specific branch of the river it was built upon slowly choked on its own silt. Over many years the water grew shallow and sluggish. Reeds sprouted in the thick mud. Eventually, the massive harbors were left completely dry. The wooden ships could no longer reach the docks. Without the river, the city could not survive. The warm afternoon sunlight fell on empty, drying riverbeds. The grand stone temples and mud-brick houses were suddenly stranded miles from the water. Nature simply changed its mind. The river moved away, and it took the life of the city with it. It is a quiet reminder that even the greatest empires are entirely at the mercy of the water they drink. When the river abandoned the old capital, it did not disappear. The same shifting currents that doomed the great city carved out a new path. Just a few miles away, the water cut a deep, navigable channel through the dirt. This new waterway was a stroke of pure geographic luck. It created the perfect conditions for a brand new settlement to rise. This new place was called Tanis. The morning sunlight sparkled on the fresh, fast-moving water. The deep channel meant that heavy ships could easily sail in from the sea. The earth had closed one door and opened another. The people simply followed the water. They gathered on the new banks, and began to build again. The river is always writing the history of this land. It decides where the cities will grow, and where they will die. The new town stood ready to catch the wealth of the flowing current. The people did not just walk away from their dry capital. When the river shifted, the rulers physically moved the old city to the new location. They refused to leave their sacred stones behind. Workers dragged the massive obelisks, heavy statues, and carved temple blocks miles across the flat delta. They used wooden sledges and thick ropes to pull the incredible weight over the dusty ground. It was a staggering effort of human will. The bright daylight beat down on the laborers as they hauled the old city to the new riverbank. Tanis was literally built out of the recycled pieces of the past. The new streets were lined with old gods. You can still see the names of older kings carved into the stones of the newer city. They carried their history with them, dragging it through the dirt until they reached the water again. The builders of this recycled city had a very specific vision. They designed the new streets as a deliberate mirror image of the old southern capital. They wanted to give the northern rulers their own sacred landscape. This way, they would never have to travel hundreds of miles upriver to pray. They built a grand temple complex with towering obelisks on the flat delta plain. They even dug a sacred lake to match the one in the south. The warm afternoon sunlight reflected off the still water. Walking through the new city felt like walking through a dream of the old one. The architecture was an exact echo of a place far away. It was a clever political trick, built entirely out of stone and water. The northern kings created a perfect copy of holy ground. They brought the power of the distant south right to their own front door. Near the coast, the rules of trade were very strict. A paranoid ruler decided he needed to control the foreigners arriving by sea. He decreed that all Greek merchants could only live and trade in one single settlement. This highly monitored delta town was called Naucrates. It became a bustling, crowded river port. Greek-style stone temples stood right alongside traditional mud-brick warehouses. Wooden merchant ships bumped against the busy docks. The afternoon sunlight caught the dust kicked up by hundreds of traders. The city was born out of suspicion and a desire for control. The king wanted the wealth of the foreigners, but he did not trust them to wander the country. So he locked them into this one vibrant, noisy town. You can imagine the mix of languages echoing over the water. It was a tiny pocket of a different world, carefully contained within the borders of the delta. Before the famous coastal cities existed, another port controlled the sea. This was Thonis Heracleion. It was the mandatory port of entry for all foreign ships arriving from the Mediterranean. Every single vessel had to stop here first. The city was a complex network of customs canals and checkpoints. Captains had to carefully navigate their wooden ships through the narrow waterways. They waited in long lines under the bright daylight. Monumental stone statues and heavy customs houses lined the edges of the water. Officials boarded every boat to inspect the cargo and collect heavy taxes. The city was a giant, watery toll booth. It grew incredibly rich just by standing in the way. The sound of water lapping against stone hulls filled the air all day. The port was the only door into the country, and the city held the only key. Nothing moved inland without paying the price first. The Grand Port was heavy with wealth, but it was also heavy with stone. The builders constructed colossal temples right on the edge of the water. They did not realize the danger hiding beneath the surface. The city sat on waterlogged clay soil. One day, a massive earthquake shook the coast. The violent shaking caused the wet clay beneath the city to suddenly liquefy. The ground simply turned to soup. The sheer weight of the massive stone columns and statues pushed them down into the earth. They tilted precariously and then slipped into the dark, swirling water. The sea rushed in to swallow the stone piers. The stormy, overcast sky watched the great port drown. The city did not fall to an enemy army. It was destroyed by its own magnificent weight. The earth could no longer hold up the heavy ambitions of the builders, and the water took it all back. The final collapse of the port was sudden, but the dying started much earlier. The outer districts of the city were slowly abandoned over many decades. The sea level was steadily rising, and the delta land was slowly sinking. The streets began to flood permanently. People had to move out of their stone houses, as the calm, dark seawater crept over the thresholds. Paved courtyards turned into shallow pools. Abandoned boats floated quietly in what used to be busy neighborhoods. The twilight cast long shadows over the half-submerged walls. The residents retreated closer to the center, giving up their homes to the tide. It was a slow, quiet surrender to the ocean. You can feel the melancholy of a place that knows it is losing a war with the water. Long before the earthquake struck, the sea was already patiently claiming the edges of the city for itself. Far inland, the oldest capital of them all, was also dying. Memphis had been the center of the world for thousands of years. But its slow decline began with a single decision. Alexander the Great arrived and decided to build a brand new city right on the Mediterranean coast. This choice shifted the economic gaze of the country permanently toward Greece. The old inland capital was suddenly left behind. The quiet, dusty streets still held monumental stone walls. Merchants still packed goods onto their donkeys in the late afternoon sun. But the real money and power had moved to the sea. The old city was no longer the center of anything. It was just a massive, beautiful relic. The energy of the country flowed north, leaving the ancient streets feeling empty and tired. A city can survive many things, but it cannot survive being ignored by the future. The loss of trade was bad, but the river delivered the final blow. Over the centuries, the Nile gradually migrated eastward. It slowly pulled away from the old capital. The once bustling docks of the city were left stranded in the thick mud. Without the water, the heart of the town finally stopped beating. The river that had fed the streets for millennia simply walked away. A vast field of dark agricultural mud slowly encroached on the ruined stone foundations. The twilight settled over the quiet, empty temples. Year after year, the river flooded and left behind layers of soft silt. The mud crept higher and higher up the walls. The earth was gently burying the oldest city in the world. Farmers eventually planted crops right over the forgotten docks. The water moved on, and the green fields quietly erased the memory of the great ships that used to dock there. The final erasure of the ancient capital happened much later. During the Middle Ages, the city was still visible as a sprawling field of ruins. But the growing city of Cairo needed building materials. Workers came to the overgrown temples and began to systematically dismantle them. They loaded the large, ancient, white limestone blocks onto wooden carts. The afternoon sun warmed the old stones as they were hauled away. The workers carted the beautiful pieces north to build new mosques and high city walls. The old capital was literally fed into the new one. The ancient stones found a new life, holding up medieval roofs. It is a quiet kind of recycling. The past is never really gone. It just changes its shape. The last traces of the oldest city were carried off in the back of a cart. The empty fields were finally left to the wind and the quiet dirt. Memphis was once known as the City of White Walls. Its massive defensive perimeter stood out against the sky. Builders coated the thick mudbrick in a heavy layer of gleaming gypsum plaster. In the bright desert sun, the walls would almost blind the eye. You can imagine how it looked to travelers arriving from the river. The bright white line marked the edge of the known world. It was a clear boundary between the wild desert and the safe city. Today, that blinding plaster is gone. The sun has baked the remaining mudbrick into a soft, dusty brown. But for centuries, this bright facade defined the landscape. It was a beacon of order and power. The white walls caught the first light of dawn. They held the last warm glow of dusk. The city wore its defenses like a bright crown. It was a quiet, constant reminder of the strength held within. The scale of those ancient defenses is hard to grasp today. The mudbrick enclosure wall of the local Pata temple was unimaginably vast. It was built to protect a massive sacred precinct. Over time, the great temple slowly fell into ruin. The desert winds wore down the sharp edges of the bricks. yet the footprint of that giant wall remained. It was so large that an entire modern Egyptian village now sits comfortably inside it. Houses and quiet streets fill the space where priests once walked. The ancient perimeter still cradles the living community. Children play where sacred offerings were once prepared. The old mudbrick has simply become part of the earth again. It forms a gentle protective ring around the modern homes. The past and present rest together in the same quiet dust. The ancient builders created a space so grand, it still shelters people today. Deep beneath the sand of this same area, a massive treasure lay hidden for centuries. An 80-ton sphinx rests quietly in a shallow pit. It was carved from a single massive piece of glowing alabaster. The stone has a soft, milky quality that seems to hold the light. Because it was buried so deeply, the harsh wind could not reach it. The blowing sand never eroded its delicate facial features. The calm, smooth face looks exactly as it did when it was first carved. The deep burial acted as a perfect, quiet vault. It kept the stone safe from the slow wear of time. Today, the Sphinx sits under the open sky once more. The sun warms its smooth back. The alabaster glows slightly in the bright midday light. It is a heavy, silent watcher. It rests peacefully in the dust of the ancient capital. Further north in the delta, the lost city of Pyramises was built on water. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed a vast hidden grid beneath the soil. The city foundations included a complex network of artificial lakes and wide canals. These waterways were woven directly into the urban plan. They allowed the royal barge to sail straight from the Nile into the palace. The king could step from his boat right onto the grand stone steps. The water brought cool breezes deep into the royal residence. It mirrored the grand columns and bright painted walls. The canals turned the sprawling capital into a lush, green oasis. Water flowed quietly past busy streets and quiet gardens. The gentle sound of lapping waves filled the royal courts. Today, those lakes are buried under flat farm fields. But the shape of that watery city still rests just below the surface. Beneath the ruins of this watery capital lies a vast, quiet industrial space. Archaeologists found a massive bronze smelting workshop hidden in the earth. Here, skilled artisans operated dozens of simple clay melting furnaces. They used rhythmic leather pot bellows to keep the fires burning hot. The workers carefully cast heavy metalwork for the sprawling city. You can almost hear the steady, breathing sound of the bellows. The workshop would have glowed with the warm, orange light of molten bronze. It was a place of intense heat and careful focus. Men poured liquid metal into precise molds. They crafted tools, weapons and shining temple doors. Now, the furnaces are cold and silent. The leather bellows have long since turned to dust. But the sandy floor still holds the memory of that intense labor. The quiet earth preserves the ashes of 1,000 ancient fires. The military stables of the city were true engineering marvels. They were built to comfortably house over 400 horses at once. The long stone buildings featured rows of sturdy wooden pillars. The floors were carefully sloped to provide perfect drainage. This kept the animals dry and healthy in the humid delta air. Carved limestone blocks served as heavy tethering stones. The horses could rest safely in the cool shade of the wide roof. The stables were designed with deep care for the animals. Fresh air flowed easily through the open doorways. The sound of shifting hooves and soft breathing filled the long halls. It was a calm, orderly space amid the busy capital. The stone floors still show the faint wear of countless hooves. The careful slope of the ground remains perfectly intact. It is a quiet testament to ancient care and clever design. Nearby, the massive mudbrick citadel of Avaris hid a surprising secret inside its walls. The interior rooms were decorated with vibrant wet plaster frescoes. These paintings were not done in the traditional local style. Instead, they showed acrobats leaping over bulls in the classic Minoan tradition. Artists were brought all the way from the island of Crete to paint them. The bright colors and flowing lines brought a piece of the sea to the desert. The graceful, moving figures stood out against the heavy mudbrick walls. It was a rare, beautiful blend of two very different worlds. The palace halls must have felt bright and alive with these foreign scenes. The plaster held the vivid reds and blues for centuries. It is strange to think of island painters working in the dusty delta. They left a quiet, colorful mark of their long journey on the palace walls. Further east, the great temple of Amun at Tanis required massive protection. It was surrounded by towering mudbrick enclosure walls. These walls were up to 50 feet thick in some places. They were engineered specifically to shield the sacred precinct from danger. The delta was prone to unpredictable, shifting floodwaters. The thick mudbrick acted as a heavy, solid dam against the rising river. It kept the inner courtyards dry and safe during the wet season. The sheer mass of the walls is hard to comprehend. They formed a quiet, secure island in a changing landscape. The soft brown bricks absorbed the heat of the sun. They stood firm against the damp soil and the creeping water. Today, the walls are heavily weathered by time and wind. But their thick, rolling shapes still guard the ruined temple. They remain a quiet symbol of endurance and strength. The kings of this city faced a different kind of threat. Rampant tomb robbing was a constant danger during their era. To protect their dead, the rulers built their royal tombs entirely underground. They hid the burial chambers directly beneath the paving stones of the main temple courtyard. There were no grand pyramids or visible monuments to mark the graves. The kings chose absolute secrecy over grand displays. Priests walked over the hidden tombs every day during their rituals. The sacred space above provided a perfect, quiet cover for the dead below. The stone chambers were dark, silent, and completely hidden from the world. This clever choice kept the royal burials safe for thousands of years. The kings rested peacefully beneath the busy life of the temple. The heavy paving stones sealed their quiet secret world away from the light. Inside one of these hidden tombs, a stunning discovery was made. The silver coffin of King Susan I rested in a damp, unadorned stone chamber. The room itself was plain and completely unpainted, but the gleaming silver sarcophagus was a masterpiece of careful art. In the ancient kingdom, silver was actually more expensive and much rarer than gold. Choosing silver was a quiet display of immense wealth and power. The metal shone softly in the dim light of the small room. The intricate carvings on the lid caught the faint glow of oil lamps. The damp air of the delta had not ruined the beautiful metal. It lay there in the dark, a bright secret locked in plain stone. The contrast between the rough walls and the smooth silver is striking. It is a quiet reminder of the hidden treasures buried in the wet earth. Out on the coast, Thonis Heraklion was not a traditional land city at all. It was intersected by a vast complex network of deep-water canals. The city functioned more like an ancient Venice, built on interconnected islands. Wooden boats navigated the winding waterways between massive stone temples. Mudbrick houses clustered tightly along the edges of the water. The canals were the main streets of this busy port. The sound of oars dipping into the water echoed against the stone walls. Bridges likely connected the small islands, allowing people to cross the deep channels. The water reflected the grand columns and the bright sky. It was a city defined entirely by its relationship with the sea. The gentle tide moved through the heart of the town every day. The canals brought trade, life, and a quiet rhythm to the island dwellers. The central temple of this island city required special protection from the water. It was surrounded by a massive, circular stone wall. This thick barrier was not just built for privacy or sacred isolation. It doubled as a heavy defensive dam against the encroaching sea. The dark water lapped constantly against the outer edge of the curved stone. Inside the wall, the temple courtyard remained dry and calm. The circular shape helped deflect the force of the waves and the tide. It was a brilliant piece of coastal engineering. The priests could perform their quiet rituals, while the sea moved just outside. The heavy stone blocks held back the weight of the ocean. The wall stood as a firm boundary between the sacred space and the wild water. It was a quiet, sturdy shield, protecting the heart of the sunken city. When the city finally fell into the sea, it took everything with it. Pinned beneath the collapsed multi-ton stone blocks of the temple are the crushed remains of ships. Over 60 ancient shipwrecks are trapped in the dark harbor mud. They were caught in the sudden collapse and sank with the heavy stones. The wooden hulls are now preserved in the deep, quiet silt. They lie exactly where they went down centuries ago. The massive carved blocks rest heavily on the fragile wooden decks. It is a silent underwater graveyard of ancient trade. The mud protects the wood from decay, holding the ships in a gentle grip. Fish swim slowly through the broken ribs of the ancient boats. The sunken harbor is a quiet snapshot of a single tragic day. The heavy stones and the wooden ships rest together in the deep, still water. Not far from the coast, the Greek trading city of Naucratis held a unique structure. It contained the Hellenion, a massive and unprecedented communal sanctuary. It also served as a large, busy warehouse for imported goods. 9 different rival Greek city-states built it jointly to consolidate their trade. They set aside their usual conflicts to share this single, grand space. The complex featured a beautiful blend of tall Greek columns and thick Egyptian mudbrick. Stacked clay amphorae filled the cool, shaded storage rooms. The sanctuary was a quiet, neutral ground for busy merchants. It was a place where different cultures and rivals could meet in peace. The heavy walls protected valuable goods from across the sea. The air smelled of olive oil, wine, and dry dust. The Hellenion stood as a quiet symbol of cooperation in a foreign land. Far to the south, the city limits of Amarna were defined in a very different way. The borders were not marked by built walls or deep canals. Instead, the king used massive boundary stelae to claim the land. These were huge royal decrees carved directly into the living limestone cliffs. The sheer rock faces surrounded the flat desert plain like a natural bowl. The deep carvings featured ancient text and tall royal figures. They stood high above the sand, visible from a great distance. The harsh midday sun cast sharp dark shadows into the carved letters. These stone markers declared the sacred limits of the new capital. They were permanent, unmoving borders cut into the bones of the earth. The cliffs themselves became the walls of the city. They stood as quiet, heavy guardians over the empty desert and the new homes. Inside those natural borders, the architecture broke all the old rules. Traditional sanctuaries were dark, enclosed, and deeply shadowed. But the great Aten temple in this city had no roof at all. It was designed to be entirely open to the bright sky. The sun could pour directly into the vast, walled courtyard. The light struck hundreds of square stone, offering tables arranged in long rows. There were no dark corners or hidden rooms for secret rituals. Everything was exposed to the harsh, brilliant light of the day. The open design welcomed the sun as the only true focus of worship. The stone tables would grow warm under the clear blue sky. The air in the courtyard was still and bright. It was a radically simple space, built only to catch the light. The temple was a quiet, open stage for the sun. The royal palaces of the city brought the natural world indoors. The floors were made of smooth plaster, meticulously painted to look like vibrant marshlands. Artists painted bright blue water, green reeds, and flying birds across the ground. This created a beautiful, quiet illusion for the royal family. As they walked through the halls, it looked as if they were stepping directly on water. They seemed to float above the painted lotus flowers and the calm pools. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating the vivid colors on the floor. The artwork turned the dry, dusty palace into a cool, imaginary oasis. The smooth plaster felt cool beneath bare feet. The painted birds seemed to freeze in mid-flight across the room. It was a gentle artistic escape from the harsh desert outside. The floor was a quiet, flat reflection of the distant river. In the Fayum oasis, the main temple of Crocodilopolis featured highly specific landscaping. The priests built a specialized, sloping sand beach inside the sacred walls. They also dug a private, calm lake just for the temple. This space was built exclusively for the comfort of the resident divine crocodile. The massive reptile could rest quietly on the smooth, artificial shore. The warm sunlight heated the sand, creating a perfect spot for the animal to bask. The enclosed pool offered cool, dark water for swimming. It was a strange, quiet sanctuary, built entirely around the needs of one creature. The priests fed the crocodile, and tended to its peaceful home. The water in the sacred lake was always still and clean. The heavy stone walls kept the noise of the city far away. It was a calm, sunny retreat for a living god. Hidden behind the main temple of Abydos is a dark, mysterious structure. The Osirion is a subterranean building made of colossal, unadorned granite blocks. The stone is completely smooth, with no carvings or bright paint. The ancient architects engineered the deep space to flood intentionally with groundwater. A dark, still channel of water surrounds the central stone platform. This made the platform look like a primeval island, emerging from the dark depths. The heavy granite pillars reflect quietly in the black water. The air down here is always cool, damp, and perfectly still. It feels like a secret place, hidden at the very bottom of the world. The smooth stones rise silently from the flooded floor. The quiet water absorbs all sound from the temple above. It is a calm, heavy monument to the deep, watery origins of the earth. The palace complex of Malkata included a staggering feat of landscape engineering. The builders dug a massive artificial lake entirely by hand in the dry earth. The perfectly rectangular basin measured over a mile long. It was lined with sturdy mudbrick retaining walls to hold the precious water. This vast pool was built solely for royal boating ceremonies. A grand wooden barge would float slowly across the calm, flat surface. The golden hour sunlight would catch the ripples from the gentle oars. The lake brought a huge expanse of cool water to the edge of the desert. It was a quiet, mirror-like surface, reflecting the wide sky. The sheer amount of labor required to dig it is hard to imagine. Yet the result was a place of absolute peace and slow movement. The water offered a quiet, floating escape from the heavy heat. Inside the mudbrick palace of this same complex, the ceilings were not left bare. The king's bedchamber featured a beautifully detailed and colorful roof. The plaster was densely painted with a repeating pattern of flying vultures. Intricate, spiraling geometric rosettes filled the spaces between the wide wings. The vibrant colors drew the eye upward in the quiet room. As the king lay in bed, he looked up at a painted sky. The soft ambient daylight from the windows illuminated the careful brushstrokes. The repeating patterns created a sense of calm, endless order. The vultures were symbols of protection, hovering silently over the sleeping ruler. The rich paint transformed a simple mudbrick ceiling into a canopy of art. It was a quiet, private masterpiece, hidden in the royal resting place. The painted birds kept a still, colorful watch through the long nights. The workers who built the royal tombs lived in a very secure place. The village of Deir el-Medina was tucked into a dry, quiet desert valley. To prevent the theft of royal gold and copper tools, security was incredibly tight. The entire village was surrounded by a high, unbroken stone wall. There was only one narrow wooden gate leading in and out of the town. Heavily armed spearmen guarded this single entrance day and night. The tight cluster of stone houses was completely sealed off from the outside world. The high wall cast long, cool shadows over the narrow streets. It kept the valuable tools safe, but it also kept the workers isolated. The village was a quiet, closed loop of daily life and hard labor. The stone barrier was a constant reminder of the secret work they did. Inside those guarded walls, the small stone houses shared a unique feature. Every home in the village was built with a specific box bed in the front room. This was a raised, enclosed mudbrick platform built directly into the architecture. It was used exclusively for childbirth, and as a quiet domestic shrine. The platform kept the family safe, and elevated from the cold floor. Small statues and simple offerings decorated the edges of the heavy bed. The dim light of a small oil lamp would cast warm shadows on the mud brick. It was the spiritual and emotional center of the small house. The enclosed shape offered a sense of privacy and deep comfort. Generations of workers were born on these simple, sturdy platforms. The box bed was a quiet, sacred space in the middle of ordinary life. It anchored the home with a feeling of peace. Far to the south, the island of Elephantine presented a difficult building challenge. The temple of the ram god Khnum was not built on flat, easy ground. The island was covered in massive, natural pink granite boulders. Instead of clearing the heavy rocks, the builders worked with them. The stone foundations of the temple were carefully carved to fit the landscape. The massive blocks were shaped to interlock directly over the rounded boulders. The temple gripped the natural rock like a heavy stone hand. The bright morning sun highlighted the seamless join between carved block and wild granite. It was a brilliant, quiet harmony between human engineering and raw nature. The building seemed to grow naturally out of the rocky island. The heavy foundations anchored the sacred space firmly against the rushing river. The temple and the boulders became one solid, unmoving shape. Built right into the riverbank of this same island is an ancient Nilometer. It is a steep, narrow stone staircase descending directly into the dark water. The stone walls are carved with precise, horizontal measurement lines. These marks were used to track the exact height of the annual flood. Priests would walk down the cool, shadowed steps to read the water level. Shafts of sunlight from above lit the damp stone and the gentle waves. The height of the river determined the fate of the entire harvest. This simple staircase was the most important gauge in the ancient world. The water lapped quietly against the ancient, carved numbers. The stone steps are worn smooth from centuries of careful observation. It is a quiet, beautiful tool, built to measure the lifeblood of the land. The river still rises and falls against those same ancient marks today. The daily rhythm of Amana was dictated entirely by the sun. You can almost feel the quiet chill of the desert dawn. As the first light touched the city, the streets began to stir. Citizens stepped out to sweep their dusty courtyards. They moved with a slow, practiced grace. Soon, small fires flickered to life behind mud-brick walls. People fired up conical clay ovens to bake their morning bread. The smell of wood smoke and warm dough drifted through the air. It was a simple, grounding start to the day. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the sand. Everyone knew their role in this sunlit capital. The light shaped every hour of their lives. They worked in harmony with the shifting rays. Even the grandest estates woke to this same quiet routine. The city breathed in unison with the dawn. It was a place built for the light. Later in the morning, the royal family emerged from their palace. They rode their wooden chariots down the wide main avenue. The wheels kicked up soft clouds of pale dust. They stopped at a specific balcony known as the Window of Appearance. Loyal officials waited below in the bright, sunlit courtyard. The air was still and warm. From the high stone window, the pharaoh looked down at the crowd. He tossed heavy gold collars to the bowing men. The metal caught the sun as it fell through the air. It was a moment of quiet awe for those gathered. The heavy necklaces landed with a soft thud in the dust. The officials gathered them with deep respect. This daily act bound the rulers to their people. It was a rhythm of giving and receiving. The bright gold gleamed against the plain earth. Then, the chariots turned and rolled slowly away. During the sweltering afternoons, the heat became heavy and still. The city's elite retreated behind high mud-brick walls. They sought refuge in their private estate gardens. These spaces offered a cool, green escape from the glaring sun. People rested in the deep shade of young sycamore trees. The broad leaves rustled softly in the faint breeze. At the center of these gardens lay tranquil, reflecting pools. The pools were shaped like a perfect letter T. The still water mirrored the bright blue sky above. Lotus flowers floated calmly on the surface. You can imagine the quiet relief of these shaded corners. The harsh desert felt miles away. Servants moved quietly, bringing cool water and fresh fruit. The afternoon stretched out in a slow, peaceful pause. It was a time to rest and simply breathe. The gardens held the heat at bay until the cool dusk arrived. Far to the south, the tomb builders of Deir el-Medina lived by a different clock. They operated on a strict 10-day week. The men worked hard in the rocky valley for 8 long days. Then, they enjoyed a restful 2-day weekend. The village grew quiet and relaxed during this time. Families spent their days off brewing thick, sweet beer in large clay jars. The rich scent of fermenting grain filled the narrow streets. In their free hours, the workers also tended to their own legacy. They meticulously painted their modest family tombs. They used the same bright pigments they applied to royal graves. The brushstrokes were careful and full of pride. It was a quiet, personal devotion. They shared jars of fresh beer while they worked. The weekend was a blend of simple pleasure and sacred duty. The village rested in the warm embrace of the valley. While the men worked in the valley, the women ran the village. They managed the local economy with sharp skill. The dusty streets became a quiet, bustling market. Neighbors bartered daily for woven baskets, fresh grain, and cloth. They used a complex credit system to keep trade fair. The value of goods was based on the weight of copper. Women carefully balanced small metal weights on wooden scales. They recorded debts and trades on smooth flakes of white limestone. Black ink marked the promises made between friends. It was a system built entirely on trust and community. You can picture them chatting in the shade of stone walls. They kept the village thriving while the valley was empty. Every transaction was a small thread tying them together. The limestone receipts piled up like a diary of daily life. The women held the village steady through the long work week. But this steady rhythm could sometimes break. Once, the workers went months without receiving their grain rations. The village storehouses sat empty and quiet. The men decided they could no longer work on empty stomachs. They organized the first recorded labor strike in human history. They simply walked off the job in the Royal Valley. The workers marched to the main temple and sat down in the dust. They laid their heavy copper tools on the ground beside them. They refused to move or return to the tombs. It was a peaceful but firm stand. They sat together in the shadow of the massive stone walls. The hot midday sun beat down on the silent crowd. They waited patiently for the officials to hear their plea. It was a quiet moment of profound human dignity. They knew their worth, and they simply stopped until it was fully recognized. During grand festivals, the palace kitchens of Malkata never slept. They operated around the clock to feed a massive influx of guests. The outdoor courtyards were filled with smoke and intense heat. Butchers worked steadily, preparing hundreds of oxen for the royal feasts. Bakers stood before glowing clay ovens through the long night. They turned out thousands of warm loaves of fresh bread. The air was thick with the smell of roasting meat and yeast. Workers moved in a tired but practiced rhythm. Firelight danced across the tall mud-brick walls. It cast long, flickering shadows over the busy cooks. You can almost hear the crackle of the large wood fires. The sheer scale of the preparation was truly staggering. Yet, there was a calm order to the endless work. Everyone knew their task in the smoky dark. They fed a city that had swelled to twice its normal size. The climax of the Jubilee Festival brought a different kind of light. The entire city gathered around a vast artificial lake. As midnight approached, the shores began to softly glow. Thousands of flickering oil lamps were lit along the mudbrick banks. The small flames reflected perfectly in the dark, calm water. The night air was cool and completely still. Then, the royal barge glided out onto the center of the lake. The pharaoh was rowed slowly across the mirrored surface. The wooden oars dipped into the water with a soft, rhythmic splash. The golden light wrapped the boat in a warm, gentle halo. It was a moment of pure, quiet magic. The massive crowd watched in hushed, breathless reverence. The stars above seemed to blend with the lamps below. The city paused to take in the breathtaking sight. The glowing lake became a perfect mirror for the night sky. Farther south, the sacred sands of Abydos held a quieter devotion. Thousands of pilgrims traveled to this holy site every year. They came to honor the gods and leave a piece of themselves behind. Each visitor brought a small, crude clay offering cup. They placed these simple vessels gently in the desert sand. This ritual was repeated year after year, century after century. Over time, the sheer number of cups transformed the landscape. The desert floor eventually became a solid carpet of pottery. As people walked, the broken clay crunched softly beneath their feet. It was a sound made by generations of quiet prayers. The sun baked the scattered shards into the earth. You can imagine the vast expanse of terracotta stretching toward the walls. Every broken piece represented a personal journey. The ground itself became a monument to human hope. The sand held the memories of countless travelers. Deep inside the main temple, a much more private ritual took place. Priests entered the innermost windowless sanctuary each morning. The stone room was dark, lit only by a single oil lamp. Here, they approached a small, solid gold statue of Osiris. They opened the wooden shrine with slow, careful hands. The priests treated the golden figure as if he were a living king. They gently washed the statue with cool, pure water. Then, they rubbed sweet-smelling perfumes into the cold metal. Finally, they dressed the god in fine, sheer white linen. The fabric draped softly over the gleaming gold. It was an intimate, deeply personal act of daily care. There was no audience, only the quiet breathing of the priests. The rich scent of lotus and myrrh filled the small space. When they finished, they closed the shrine doors. The god rested in the dark, ready for another day. On the southern island of Elephantine, creation was tied to the river. In the quiet sanctuaries, priests worshipped the ram-headed god Khnum. They believed he patiently molded every human being on a divine potter's wheel. He used the rich, dark mud of the Nile to shape life. To honor him, priests dedicated smooth, unfired clay vessels. They placed these simple pots on stone altars in the dim light. The clay was soft, holding the potential for life. The sanctuary smelled of damp earth and burning oil. It was a peaceful, grounding place to sit and reflect. The priests moved with a slow, deliberate grace. They understood the deep connection between the river and the people. Every pot was a silent prayer for new life. The warm glow of the lamps flickered against the stone walls. The river flowed steadily outside, providing the mud that sustained them all. Outside the temples, the island had a rougher edge. Garrison soldiers were stationed here to guard the southern border. Their days were long, and often uneventful. They spent their quiet evenings sitting by the roaring river cataract. The water crashed loudly against massive pink granite boulders. To pass the time, the soldiers took up copper chisels. They carefully carved their names and titles into the smooth stone. Some added short prayers for safe passage or good health. The setting sun cast a warm golden light over their work. The rhythmic tap of metal on stone blended with the rushing water. It was a way to leave a permanent mark on a lonely outpost. You can almost feel the cool evening breeze coming off the river. The soldiers found comfort in this slow, repetitive task. Their names remain etched in the pink granite today. They are quiet voices speaking from the past. Far to the north, the ancient capital of Memphis held grand traditions. After 30 years on the throne, a pharaoh journeyed here. They came to celebrate the rare and sacred Sed festival. This grand jubilee was meant to renew the king's power. In the bright temple courtyard, a measured course was laid out. Low curved stone markers defined the path. The pharaoh ritually ran around this track to prove his strength. He had to demonstrate his enduring vitality to the watching gods. The limestone courtyard gleamed in the bright sunlight. The crowd watched in respectful silence as the king ran. It was a physical test of his right to rule. The rhythmic sound of his footsteps echoed off the stone walls. The run was short, but its meaning was profound. It promised another era of stability for the land. The city celebrated the renewed life of their leader. The city was also home to a very different kind of royalty. The sacred Apis bull lived a life of extreme luxury here. The people believed this massive black and white bull was a living god. He resided in a clean, spacious stone courtyard. A dedicated staff of priests attended to his every need. The bull received soothing daily massages to keep him calm. Priests gently hand-fed him sweet honeyed cakes. The animal rested peacefully in the warm afternoon sunlight. It is strange to think of a bull living better than most kings. The priests moved around him with quiet, practiced reverence. They brushed his coat until it shone in the light. The courtyard smelled of fresh hay and sweet honey. The bull simply chewed his food, unaware of his divine status. It was a bizarre but deeply peaceful corner of the city. The rhythm of his days was slow and pampered. In the dusty local workshops, time moved at a crawl. Craftsmen here spent years working on a single project. They were tasked with shaping blocks of incredibly hard diorite. They had no iron or steel to cut the dark stone. Instead, they used only soft copper tools, water, and abrasive sand. A worker would sit for hours, patiently rubbing the wet sand against the rock. The friction slowly ground away the hard surface. It was a tedious, exhausting process that required immense focus. The rhythmic scraping sound filled the small, sunlit rooms. They worked until the statues were perfectly smooth and flawless. You can imagine the quiet dedication in their hands. They traded years of their lives to create something eternal. The dark stone slowly revealed the shape of a king, or a god. It was a triumph of patience over impossible material. The finished statues gleamed like dark glass. The military capital of Pyramuses woke to a much louder rhythm. The city awoke to the thunderous sound of morning drills. Hundreds of charioteers gathered in the vast, dusty parade grounds. These wide plains sat just outside the high palace walls. The soldiers practiced high-speed maneuvers as the sun came up. Wooden wheels rattled loudly over the hard, dry earth. Horses snorted and kicked up thick clouds of pale dust. The early morning sunlight cut through the haze. It was a chaotic but highly organized display of power. The drivers shouted commands, steering their teams with sharp precision. You can feel the ground shake beneath the spinning wheels. The city was built for war, and this was its heartbeat. The drills continued until the sun grew too hot. Then, the dust slowly settled back onto the plain. The horses were led away to rest in the shade. Beneath the noisy streets, the royal cellars were cool and quiet. Here, royal vintners treated their wine with surprising modern precision. The dark rooms were filled with rows of tall clay jars. Workers moved carefully by the soft glow of oil lamps. They sealed each jar with a stopper of wet mud. Then, they pressed a carved seal into the damp clay. They meticulously labeled each vessel to record its exact details. The mud recorded the specific year and the exact vineyard. It even included the chief winemaker's personal name. This careful tracking ensured the pharaoh only drank the best vintages. The smell of damp earth and old wine filled the cellar. It was a quiet, organized space far from the chariots above. The workers took pride in their neat, orderly rows. The wine rested in the dark, slowly aging to perfection. The mud seals dried hard, locking the history inside. Nearby, the older city of Avaris held its own equestrian history. The Hyksos elite who ruled here introduced the horse and chariot to Egypt. These animals were highly prized, and still quite unfamiliar. The daily routine of the elite involved exercising these beautiful creatures. They drove their wooden chariots along the muddy banks of the delta. The wide river flowed quietly beside the reed-lined shores. The morning air was cool and thick with mist. The horses trotted gracefully through the soft, wet earth. It was a peaceful way to start the day. The riders learned to handle the reins with gentle skill. The introduction of the horse changed the landscape forever. But here, it was just a quiet morning ride. The sun reflected off the calm water as they passed. The sound of hooves in the mud was a new rhythm for the land. The city slowly woke to this steady beat. In the northern city of Tanis, mornings were marked by grace. This city served as the northern counterpart to Grand Thebes. It hosted elaborate daily processions through its peaceful avenues. White-robed priests carried a gilded, boat-shaped shrine on their shoulders. Inside the shrine rested the spirit of the god Amun. They walked slowly down streets lined with tall, swaying palm trees. The morning light caught the gold leaf on the wooden boat. The priests moved in perfect, silent unison. The air smelled of burning incense and fresh palm fronds. Citizens stopped their work to watch the god pass by. It was a quiet, moving display of faith. The stone pavement echoed softly with their bare feet. The procession brought a sense of calm order to the city. It was a daily reminder of the divine presence. The golden boat seemed to float above the quiet crowd. Away from the main streets, the local weavers were hard at work. They were renowned for producing incredibly fine, delicate linen. They sat at wooden looms in shaded mudbrick rooms. The soft clack of the loom was a constant, soothing sound. They worked the threads to create fabric so sheer it was nearly transparent. This lightweight cloth was highly prized by the elite. It offered cool relief during the sweltering delta summers. The weavers needed steady hands and immense patience. The white threads caught the soft ambient daylight from the windows. You can imagine the gentle rhythm of the shuttle moving back and forth. It was quiet, focused labor that produced pure luxury. The finished linen felt like a cool breeze against the skin. They folded the sheer fabric with careful, practiced hands. The city's wealth was woven one delicate thread at a time. The rooms smelled of clean flax and dust. On the coast, the port of Thonis Heracleon thrived on steady trade. The city was a maze of bustling, water-filled canal markets. Merchants from across the sea gathered here at golden hour. They relied on a strict system of standardized bronze and lead weights. Fair trade was the absolute rule of these busy waterways. Men in linen tunics carefully balanced their wooden scales. They weighed imported olive oil against fresh local grain. The small metal weights clinked softly against the wooden trays. Tall clay amphorae were stacked neatly along the stone docks. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the busy scene. Voices murmured quietly in a dozen different languages. Yet, the language of the scales was completely universal. Everyone watched the balance beam with sharp, quiet attention. It was a rhythm of commerce built on careful trust. The water lapped gently against the sides of the merchant boats. As the merchants packed up, the fishermen began their work. At dusk, they steered their small wooden reed boats into the shallow bay. The monumental stone statues of the city watched over them. The water grew dark and calm as the light faded. The men stood silently at the edge of their boats. They cast wide nets into the cool, dark waters. The nets hit the surface with a soft, spreading splash. They were hunting for silver mullet and bottom-feeding catfish. The work was slow, requiring patience and a steady hand. The twilight sky turned a deep, bruised purple. You can hear the gentle creak of the reeds in the current. The fish they caught tonight would feed the city tomorrow. They would be sold at dawn in the same canal markets. It was a quiet, endless cycle of harvest. The bay provided for them, night after night. During the festival month of Koyak, the canals hosted a deeper magic. Priests gathered to honor the cycle of life and death. They crafted a human-shaped effigy of Osiris from dark soil. They mixed the rich earth with dormant barley seeds. They placed this earthen figure on a small, ornate wooden boat. The boat was set adrift on the dark, quiet canals. As it floated, the seeds began to sprout bright green shoots. The dead soil suddenly burst with new, vibrant life. It was a powerful symbol of rebirth floating through the city. The soft twilight illuminated the green barley against the dark water. People watched from the banks in hushed, reverent silence. The boat drifted slowly on the gentle current. It carried the promise of the coming harvest. The city trusted the water to bring life back from the dark. It was a beautiful, quiet miracle. Inland, the trading post of Naucrates had a different evening rhythm. At night, Greek merchants gathered in the warm, mudbrick taverns. They sat together on simple wooden benches. The rooms were lit by the soft glow of hanging oil lamps. The men drank expensive, imported Chian wine from painted clay cups. The rich, dark wine tasted of home and distant shores. They traded quiet rumors about the pharaoh's court. The air was thick, with the smell of roasting meat and spilled wine. It was a comfortable, familiar space for travelers far from home. Voices hummed in a low, steady murmur. Shadows danced across the painted faces on their drinking cups. They shared stories of the sea and the desert. The tavern offered a small slice of Greece in the Egyptian night. The oil lamps burned low as the hours passed. The city slept, while the merchants talked until dawn. In the Fayum oasis, Crocodilopolis offered a truly unique spectacle. Visitors traveled to the main temple to see the sacred crocodile. They would buy roasted meat and sweet honey cakes from local vendors. Then, they walked down to the sandy temple beach. The massive reptile rested calmly in the bright afternoon sun. People watched in absolute awe as the priests approached the beast. A priest would kneel in the warm sand beside the animal. He gently opened the crocodile's powerful, toothy jaws. With careful hands he inserted the sweet offerings into its mouth. The crocodile accepted the food with surprising, lazy calm. It was a terrifying creature, treated like a beloved pet. The contrast between danger and devotion was striking. The sun beat down on the quiet, sandy shore. The visitors left feeling they had touched the divine. The crocodile simply closed its eyes and went back to sleep. Deep in the desert sands of Abydos, archaeologists uncovered something entirely unexpected. They found a fleet of 14 full-sized wooden boats. These massive vessels were carefully buried in shallow mudbrick graves. They were placed there centuries before the first pyramid was ever built. You can imagine the quiet effort it took to drag these heavy hulls across the dry earth. The wood has weathered over thousands of years, but the curved shapes remain clear. It is strange to find a fleet of ships resting so far from the water. They sit peacefully in the warm sand, waiting for a tide that will never come. The dry desert air preserved the timber in a state of quiet suspension. It feels like a secret kept by the landscape itself. The builders left no grand monuments here, just these silent wooden frames. They offer a gentle reminder of how much history still sleeps beneath the dunes. Inside a specific stone corridor nearby, there is a carving that looks bizarrely modern. If you look closely at the wall, you might see shapes resembling a helicopter and a submarine. For years, people wondered how such mechanical designs ended up in an ancient temple. The truth is much simpler, and quite funny. It is just an optical illusion, caused by a lazy stone carver. One pharaoh simply decided to carve his own name directly over the name of an older king. The overlapping symbols accidentally created these strange, futuristic shapes. The deep cuts in the stone catch the light in just the right way. It is a quiet accident of history, frozen in the rock. The original scribes would probably be very confused by what we see today. It is a gentle reminder that even grand monuments are made by ordinary people making quick decisions. The stone simply holds whatever marks we leave behind. Further north in the workers' city of Cahoon, excavators found something wonderfully ordinary. They uncovered perfectly preserved wooden rat traps. These simple boxes feature clever sliding doors, designed to protect the town's precious grain silos from desert pests. You can almost picture a baker setting one down in a dusty storeroom at twilight. The design is so practical and familiar that it bridges the gap of thousands of years. It is easy to think of ancient places as grand and mysterious. But the people who lived here dealt with the exact same daily chores we do. They swept their floors, stored their food, and tried to keep the mice away. The dry climate kept the wooden mechanisms completely intact. They rest quietly now, their working days long over. It is a small, specific detail that brings the ancient streets back to life. The quiet hum of daily survival echoes in these simple wooden boxes. In the village of Deir el-Medina, the daily routines of ordinary workers were carefully recorded. A jagged flake of white limestone found here contains a very relatable piece of history. It is an ancient excuse note for a man who missed a day of work. The official reason recorded by the scribe was simply that he was brewing beer. You can almost hear the casual conversation that led to this note. The scribe dipped his brush in black ink and wrote it down without any fuss. It was a perfectly valid reason to stay home in this busy community. The limestone flake sat in the dust for centuries, holding on to this tiny human moment. It is comforting to know that taking a day off has always been part of life. The warm afternoon sun still bakes the stones of the village today. The grand tombs they built are famous, but this small note feels much more personal. When minor neighborhood disputes arose in the village, the residents had a unique way to settle them. They relied on a local oracle to keep the peace. Priests in white linen would carry a small, gilded wooden statue of a deified pharaoh on their shoulders. The villagers would gather in the calm courtyard and ask the statue simple yes or no questions. The priests interpreted the slight, natural movements of the heavy wooden palanquin as divine answers. A sudden tilt or a gentle sway was all it took to resolve an argument over a property line. It was a highly practical system wrapped in a quiet ritual. The community trusted the process, and it allowed them to move past their daily grievances. You can imagine the hushed crowd, waiting for the wooden figure to lean. It is a beautiful example of how people invent ways to live together peacefully. The dusty courtyard still feels like a place of quiet resolution. Farther south, the sprawling palace at Malkata held its own highly specific secrets. Deep inside the complex, there was a cool, dark storage room, dedicated to just one thing. It held thousands of tall clay jars filled with a particular type of sweet ale. Every single jar was meticulously painted with delicate blue vines around the neck. This specific decoration was used solely to denote the special contents inside. You can picture the palace servants walking down the dim corridors to fetch a jar for the evening meal. The sheer volume of the ale shows how much the royal household enjoyed it. The painted vines added a touch of beauty to a purely functional space. It is a quiet reminder of the specialized tastes of the people who lived here. The empty jars now rest in the quiet dust, their sweet contents long gone. The blue paint still clings to the clay, bright and clear. Just outside the palace walls, excavators found something truly puzzling. They uncovered a beautifully painted, ornate mud brick staircase sitting in the middle of a flat courtyard. The strange thing is that the stairs lead up to absolutely nowhere. They end abruptly in mid-air, with no platform, door, or building attached. It was likely built as a temporary stage for a single, highly specific ceremony. Once the event was over, the structure was simply abandoned in the sun. It is a strange and beautiful oddity, standing alone in the desert dirt. You can imagine the bright colors of the paint fading slowly over the years. The steps wait patiently for someone to climb them, offering a grand entrance to the empty sky. It feels like a piece of a dream left behind in the waking world. The dry wind sweeps across the top step, carrying away the memory of whatever happened here. In the short-lived capital of Amana, the local sculptors achieved a stunningly realistic art style. They created incredibly lifelike statues that still captivate people today. But they actually achieved this hyper-realistic look by cheating just a little bit. The artists cast plaster life masks directly from the faces of living people. They kept these unpainted white masks on shelves in their dusty workshops. The sculptors used them as exact, three-dimensional references while they carved the final stone pieces. It was a brilliant and highly practical shortcut. You can imagine the quiet workshop, filled with the exact faces of the city's residents staring back from the walls. The sunlight streaming through the doorway would catch the smooth curves of the plaster. It is a deeply human detail that strips away the magic of the art and reveals the clever craft behind it. The artists were just trying to make their daily work a little bit easier. Archaeologists digging in the same city found a fascinating cache of diplomatic letters. These small, baked clay tablets were covered in tiny, precise cuneiform writing. One of the tablets contains a highly irritated message from a foreign king. He was complaining bitterly that the pharaoh had sent him gold statues as a gift. But when the statues arrived, they turned out to be just carved wood covered in thin gold plating. It is a wonderfully petty moment of international diplomacy, frozen in clay. You can almost feel the frustration of the foreign ruler when he realized he had been tricked. The small tablet rested quietly in the sand for centuries, holding on to this ancient grievance. It is a gentle reminder that political posturing and cheap gifts are nothing new. The soft glow of an oil lamp once illuminated these tiny angry words. Now the tablet just tells a quiet story of a very old disappointment. In the grand northern capital of Pyramuses, the royal palace housed a very unusual resident. The king kept a massive, fully grown pet lion, living right inside the halls. The lion was given the rather dramatic name of Slayer of his enemies. Despite the fierce title, the great cat was trained to be remarkably calm. It would sleep peacefully on a woven mat at the very foot of the ornate golden throne. You can imagine the quiet breathing of the massive animal echoing in the grand stone hall. Visitors must have been terrified, but the lion simply rested in the bright sunlight from the high windows. It is a strange and vivid image of royal life. The heavy paws and thick mane brought a piece of the wild directly into the center of power. The great hall is gone now, but the memory of the sleeping lion remains. It is a quiet, powerful detail. Not far away, the bustling delta city of Avaris was home to many foreign residents. These newcomers quietly introduced a major technological revolution to the local weavers. They brought the upright wooden loom into the country for the very first time. This simple change allowed workers to create much wider and more complex linen garments than ever before. You can picture the fine threads strung tightly across the tall wooden frame. The soft sunlight streaming through a small mud-brick window would illuminate the dust in the air. The rhythmic clack of the loom became a new sound in the neighborhood. It was a peaceful domestic shift that changed how people dressed every single day. The upright loom made the work easier, and the fabric better. It is a gentle reminder of how migration brings quiet, practical gifts. The simple wooden frame changed the fabric of the culture, without making a single sound. The ruins of the city also contain the remains of a massive, commercial vineyard. Archaeologists uncovered wide, shallow mud-brick vats, sitting in the dusty courtyards. These vats were used for crushing grapes, and the mudbrick is still stained dark purple from the ancient juice. The workers would step into the vats and crush the fruit with their bare feet. You can almost smell the sweet fermenting scent of the grapes, warming in the afternoon sun. The scale of the operation shows just how much wine the city produced and consumed. It was a busy, sticky and vibrant place during the harvest season. Now, the vats sit empty and quiet under the open sky. The dark stains are the only proof of the sweet wine that once flowed here. It is a beautiful sensory detail that grounds the ancient city in a very real physical process. The earth itself remembers the harvest. Further into the delta, the spectacular royal tombs of Tanis held their secrets for millennia. They were finally discovered completely intact in the early months of 1939. It was an archaeological find that should have captivated the entire globe. But the discovery was almost entirely ignored by the rest of the world. Just weeks later, the outbreak of the Second World War dominated every global headline. The quiet excavation camp, with its canvas tents and wooden crates, was overshadowed by modern conflict. The archaeologists worked peacefully under the starry sky, while the world outside prepared for war. It is a strange twist of fate that such a grand discovery happened at the worst possible moment. The ancient kings remained in the shadows just a little bit longer. The quiet ruins of the city kept their peace, while the modern era fractured. It is a gentle reminder of how timing changes everything. Among the treasures hidden beneath the city was a truly magnificent artifact. It was the death mask of King Suzens I, a masterpiece of ancient metallurgy. The mask was crafted from solid gold and polished to a soft, warm shine. The artists intricately inlaid deep blue glass to outline his serene, idealized features. The contrast between the bright gold and the dark blue glass is striking and beautiful. It rested on a simple stone slab in a softly lit, quiet chamber for thousands of years. The mask projects a feeling of absolute calm and eternal rest. You can see the incredible skill of the metal workers in every smooth curve of the face. It is a quiet, perfect object, hidden away in the dark earth. The heavy gold caught the light of the excavators, lamps, waking up from a very long sleep. It remains one of the most beautiful faces ever crafted. However, not all the kings buried here enjoyed such incredible wealth. Another ruler, named Amenemope, was found wearing a very different kind of gold death mask. His mask was surprisingly thin, slightly dented, and rather crudely crafted. It is flimsy and fragile, lacking the heavy, confident perfection of the others. This thin gold face is a quiet testament to the city's hidden financial struggles at the time. The kingdom simply did not have the resources to create a masterpiece for him. It is a deeply human detail that makes the Grand Tomb feel a bit more vulnerable. The mask rests in the dark, lit only by a single oil lamp, telling a story of quiet decline. It shows that even kings had to make do with what they had. The thin metal still tried to offer him a peaceful rest. It is a gentle, honest reflection of a difficult era. Down in the ancient capital of Memphis, the scale of daily rituals was massive. Archaeologists found an enormous embalming table carved from a single glowing block of white calcite. This smooth rectangular stone was specifically engineered for a very large task. It was used solely for mummifying the giant, sacred Apis bulls. The stone carvers designed it with a gentle slope and a carved drainage channel at one end. You can appreciate the practical engineering required to handle such a massive animal. The bright daylight now washes over the smooth white stone in the quiet room. It is a strange and highly specific piece of religious furniture. The sheer size of the table makes you realize how important these animals were to the city. The heavy calcite block has outlasted the temples and the priests. It sits peacefully now, a beautiful piece of stone with a very unusual past. The city was so cosmopolitan that it welcomed people from all over the ancient world. A neighborhood of Carian mercenaries from Asia Minor settled here and left behind something unique. They carved beautiful limestone tombstones that perfectly blended two very different cultures. The weathered stones show traditional Egyptian carvings of the jackal god Anubis. But right next to the god, the mercenaries carved their own distinct Anatolian alphabet. It is a quiet, beautiful compromise between their old home and their new one. The warm sand now drifts around these heavy stone markers. You can imagine the families trying to honor their traditions while respecting the local gods. The strange mix of symbols tells a story of people finding a way to belong. The ancient script has finally been deciphered, letting these quiet voices speak again. It is a gentle reminder that cities have always been places where different worlds meet and mix. In the lush Fayum oasis, the city of Crocodilopolis took animal worship to an astonishing level. The priests kept a single sacred crocodile named Petsuchos, who lived in absolute luxury. This large, calm reptile spent its days resting on a warm, sandy bank. It was adorned with heavy gold rings pierced directly through its ear slits. The priests even fastened ornate, jeweled bracelets around its thick front legs. You can picture the heavy gold glinting in the bright daylight as the animal slowly moved. It is a bizarre and fascinating image of devotion. The crocodile simply accepted the jewelry and the daily offerings of fine food. It lived a life of quiet, pampered ease in the center of the bustling temple. The strange sight of a jeweled predator perfectly captures the unique spirit of the city. It is a wonderful, odd detail that feels almost like a fable. When a sacred crocodile finally died, the city treated it with the utmost respect. The massive animals were carefully mummified and wrapped in fine linen. Archaeologists have found thousands of these wrapped reptiles resting in the dark stone chambers. The strangest part is how some of the massive adult crocodiles were prepared. The priests arranged dozens of tiny mummified baby crocodiles directly on their backs. It is a surprisingly tender and strange way to bury a fierce predator. The large mummy rests on a stone slab, carrying the tiny ones into the dark. The dim glow of an oil lamp reveals the careful wrapping of each small shape. It shows a deep, quiet dedication to the rituals of the temple. The silent, wrapped figures wait peacefully in the cool shadows. It is a gentle, eerie sight that speaks to a very specific kind of faith. Near the coast, the trading hub of Naucrates was busy making things for the world. The local workshops became famous across the Mediterranean for mass-producing beautiful bright blue faience amulets. The artisans exported thousands of these tiny glazed scarabs to Greece, Italy, and beyond. You can picture a wooden workbench covered in hundreds of these bright blue shapes. The soft daylight would catch the shiny glaze on the tiny beetles. It was a quiet, steady industry that connected this Egyptian city to distant shores. The small amulets were cheap, beautiful, and easy to carry on long voyages. They were a tiny piece of Egypt that anyone could own. The workshops must have been filled with the quiet focus of people making the same shape over and over. The bright blue color remains just as vivid today as it was then. It is a small, perfect thing made by careful hands. This city was also the only place in the country where a very specific financial rule was broken. The pharaoh allowed the minting of silver coins here, which was highly unusual. The rest of the country still relied on the traditional barter system of grain and goods. But the Greek mercenaries stationed in the city absolutely refused to be paid in wheat. They wanted shiny, freshly minted silver coins that they could carry in a leather pouch. So the government quietly made an exception just for them. You can imagine a small pile of these silver coins resting on a rough wooden table. The bright metal caught the daylight, representing a new way of doing business. It is a funny, practical compromise between two very different economic systems. The coins are a quiet reminder that money often changes the rules. The heavy silver simply solved a very stubborn problem. Out in the bay, the sunken ruins of Thonis Herakleion held a long-standing geographical mystery. For centuries, Scholars debated if Thonis and Heracleion were two completely different cities. The argument went back and forth in quiet libraries for a very long time. The mystery was finally solved when divers found a massive black granite stele underwater. The perfectly preserved slab was covered in crisp hieroglyphs that explicitly stated they were the exact same place. It is a wonderful moment of clarity delivered by a heavy piece of stone. The massive slab rests on the muddy sea floor, surrounded by small, curious fish. The dim, filtered underwater light washes over the ancient words. It is funny to think of a stone sign patiently waiting underwater to settle an argument. The heavy granite simply held the truth, until someone finally came looking for it. The quiet sea kept the secret safe. The muddy harbor of the sunken city was also littered with a very specific kind of offering. Divers found hundreds of tiny, mass-produced lead boats resting in the silt. These crude little models were thrown into the water by ancient sailors. They were used as cheap, heavy offerings to ensure a safe passage across the unpredictable sea. You can imagine a sailor standing on the docks at dusk, tossing a heavy metal boat into the dark water. The leads sank quickly to the bottom, carrying a quiet hope for a calm voyage. The tiny boats are partially covered in mud now, resting in the dim underwater light. They are not grand or beautiful, but they are deeply personal. Each little boat represents a moment of quiet worry and a wish for safety. The harbor holds on to these heavy little hopes, long after the sailors have gone. Far to the south, the island of Elephantine was a busy border town with a diverse population. A cache of rolled papyri found here revealed a thriving community of Jewish mercenaries. The documents showed that they had built their own temple to Yahweh right on the island. Amazingly, it was located right next door to the grand Egyptian temple of the god Khnum. It is a beautiful example of different faiths living side by side in a crowded space. You can picture the papyrus scrolls tied with string, resting on a stone ledge overlooking the rushing river. The bright morning sunlight warms the granite boulders along the water. The quiet tolerance of the neighborhood is recorded in these fragile, dry pages. It shows that people have always found ways to share their sacred spaces. The river flows past the island, washing away the borders between the different communities. One of the ancient legal documents found on the island is wonderfully petty. It is a formal complaint from a man who decided to sue his neighbor. The neighbor had built a new mudbrick wall that completely blocked the only window in his house. You can easily picture the narrow, dusty alleyway between the two homes. The newly built brick wall sits right up against a small wooden window frame, plunging the room into darkness. It is a timeless, frustrating dispute over property lines and natural light. The harsh midday sun beats down on the alley, highlighting the stubbornness of the two men. The fragile papyrus recorded this minor neighborhood drama for thousands of years. It is comforting to know that people have always argued over fences and views. The grand history of the island is built on top of these tiny, everyday annoyances. The blocked window is a perfectly human detail. Our walk through lost cities of ancient Egypt is coming to an end. Wherever you've drifted to, you don't need to come back. There's nothing more to listen for tonight. Sleep well.